Stop right there. I need to ask you something that might sting a little. Are you stuck replaying the same moments over and over? That text you should have sent differently? The way they looked at you one last time? That conversation that keeps you up at night? Here's the brutal truth nobody wants to tell you. If you're constantly available, constantly chasing, constantly explaining yourself, you've already lost their interest. But what if I told you there's a way to flip this entire dynamic? What if the key to making someone miss you isn't about doing more, but about doing less? Listen, when someone truly mattered to you, your brain turns into a broken record player, replaying the greatest hits until the pain becomes background music. I get it. We've all been there. But here's what most people don't understand about human psychology. The harder you chase, the faster they run. The more available you are, the less valuable you become. It's not personal. It's just how attraction works. Today, I'm going to share 8 powerful principles that will completely transform how people see you. These aren't manipulative games or petty revenge tactics. These are mature, dignified strategies that do 2 things simultaneously. They preserve your self-respect, and they make others realize what they lost when they lost you. Think of this as advice from someone who's been in the trenches and emerged stronger, wiser, and infinitely more magnetic. Here's your first mistake: turning your feelings into a 24/7 broadcast. You know what I'm talking about. The constant texts, the late-night voice messages, the compulsive story watching. It's like leaving all the lights on in an empty house hoping someone will come home. But here's a counterintuitive truth. If they already know you're interested, saying it 100 more times doesn't make it more true. It just makes you smaller. The strongest move? Step back gracefully. If you usually text first, don't. If you always say yes to their invitations, politely decline a few. Rediscover what you actually enjoy when you're alone. Picture this. Instead of your usual after-work call, you decide to attend an old friend's art exhibition. You come back with new stories, genuine laughter, and a calm energy that wasn't there before. When you do reconnect, they notice something different. Not because you played a game, but because you started living a life that doesn't revolve around their responses. This isn't cruelty. This is maturity, and maturity is magnetic. Let's talk about scarcity, but not the toxic kind. I'm not suggesting you ghost people or play cruel games. I'm talking about creating space so that your presence has actual weight. Think about it like this. A limited edition vinyl record feels more valuable than a song on endless repeat. Your brain does this automatic value calculation. What's always available becomes background noise, but what's rare becomes precious. Here's how to do this with class. Be warm and genuine when you interact, but don't orbit their entire day. Fill your schedule with meaningful activities. When they ask to hang out and you already have plans with friends, honor those commitments. For example, if you have a regular coffee routine and they expect to find you in the same spot every day, change it up. Take a weekend hiking trip instead. Your life shifts, and when they glimpse that shift, it registers as change, as absence, which is actually just your presence somewhere else. The key is that you're not sitting at home sulking. You're genuinely building a life so interesting that you can't always be available. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply be quiet. Not the cold shoulder, not punishment, but silence that comes from genuine self-respect. When you stop chasing conversations with desperate explanations, when you stop trying to prove your point 10 different ways, you actually protect your value. Quality silence gives you space to think clearly and respond from strength instead of desperation. Here's what most people get wrong. They think silence means you don't care. But real silence is where you rebuild yourself. It's where you find your center again. Imagine you had a disagreement with someone. Instead of sending that long emotional paragraph explaining yourself, you simply say, "I need some time to process this. I'll reach out when I'm ready to have a productive conversation." That single response shows more maturity than 20 desperate text messages ever could. It demonstrates that you respect yourself enough to only engage when you're operating from a place of calm strength. This is the kind of quiet confidence that makes people realize you're not someone to be taken lightly. You're someone who knows their worth. Here's why so many people get stuck in chase mode. Their entire emotional world starts revolving around one person. Every plan, every mood, every thought becomes about them. No wonder you feel empty when they pull away. You've built nothing that's truly yours. The and solution: create rituals and routines that belong to you alone. These become your emotional anchors, keeping you grounded regardless of what's happening in your relationships. Maybe it's a morning workout routine that centers you for the day. Maybe it's reading for 30 minutes before bed or working on that creative project you've been putting off. Perhaps it's a weekly call with your funniest friend or exploring a new neighborhood every Saturday. These aren't just activities, they're investments in your independence. They remind you that you have a rich, full life that exists completely separate from anyone else's attention or approval. For instance, instead of scrolling through their social media at night, spend 10 minutes writing in a journal. Nobody needs to see it. You don't need to post about it, but after a few weeks, you'll notice something profound. You feel calmer, clearer, more in control of your emotional state. That kind of quiet self-possession is infinitely more attractive than desperate availability. Here's the thing about memory. People remember the stories you live, not the hours you spent waiting for their text messages. If all they remember about you is someone glued to their phone, that's a pretty weak narrative. Start creating moments worth remembering. Visit that live music venue downtown. Try cooking a cuisine you've never attempted. Take a spontaneous day trip somewhere you've always been curious about. The experiences don't need to be expensive or elaborate. They just need to be real. Here's the beautiful part. You don't even need to advertise these experiences. Sometimes the smallest details are what stick. When someone asks about your weekend, instead of saying nothing much, you can say, "I discovered this tiny bookstore that only sells mysteries from the 1940s, and the owner has a story about every single book." That one sentence makes you sound alive, curious, engaged with the world. And being genuinely alive, having stories, experiences, movement, is infinitely more magnetic than sitting around waiting for someone else to give your life meaning. The goal isn't to make anyone jealous. The goal is to become the kind of person you'd want to spend time with. Real leadership isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about stepping up and making decisions without needing constant validation or permission from others. Too many people fall into the trap of always asking, "So what do you want to do?" While this seems considerate, it can actually become exhausting for the other person. They start seeing you as someone who can't make decisions, someone who's always waiting for direction. Flip this dynamic. Be the person who creates plans. Say something lands. Say something like, "There's this new art installation downtown. Let's check it out Saturday at 3. Then grab dinner at that place you mentioned." Clear, decisive, considerate of their interest, but led by your initiative. If they're not interested, no problem. You adjust. But the fact that you took the lead demonstrates something crucial. You're someone who can create experiences, not just passively wait for them to happen. This kind of gentle decisiveness sends a powerful message. You're building a life, not just existing in one. So here's what I want you to understand. Making someone miss you isn't about punishment or manipulation. It's about becoming the fullest, most authentic version of yourself. Someone whose absence actually means something because their presence had value. The 8 principles I've shared today aren't quick fixes or magic tricks. They're a blueprint for rebuilding your life in a way that makes you magnetic. Not because you're playing games, but because you've become genuinely interesting. Here's your homework, and I want you to start today. First, identify one area where you've been too available, too eager, too accommodating. Pull back gently in that area. Second, choose one new ritual or routine that's entirely yours. Something that grounds you and reminds you of who you are outside of any relationship. Third, plan one experience this week that will give you something interesting to talk about. It doesn't have to be elaborate, just something that adds a new page to your story. Remember this. The goal isn't to manipulate anyone into missing you. The goal is to build a life so rich, so full, so genuinely engaging, that your absence naturally creates a void. When you become someone who knows their worth, who has their own interests, who leads with quiet confidence, that's when people start to realize what they had when they had you. Whether they come back or not becomes irrelevant because you'll have gained something far more valuable: a deep, unshakable sense of your own worth. Stop chasing, start building. The right people will notice. And more importantly, you'll have created a life you actually want to live. Your worth isn't determined by who misses you. It's determined by how much you value yourself. Now go build that,